program that you have nothing to do with, and I'm going to realize I also finished my writing a week ago.
Now, that's a presentation I'm looking forward to heckling at.
Indeed.
But I got a question for you, Ken,
Yeah.
because Sarah's been curious about this, she's too nice to ask.
Yeah.
Do you think that presenting with you confers heckling immunity?
She
or
asked me
draws
this a
heckling
moment
fire?
ago. Well, it could be that all bars will be aimed at me, so it will confer upon her personal immunity, provided she's not sitting so close that she gets transference.
You have a law degree?
Yeah, she's a big boss.
Do you have a library degree?
No.
Actually, I think transference requires a psychological degree.
Oh,
Or parasite.
yes. I actually don't know, and I don't know if it's something, I would probably, my educated guess would be SX. Because I don't usually hear people saying dash. Too bad Ken left the room before I got the chance to heckle him about his law school, since that was brought up.
Which one, Hollywood upstairs law school?
Which I was going to make,
Bob's law school.
basically make that implication because he went to UF, but,
I don't know. I don't know.
I love it. I have a student who just sent me an email that basically said, she's a student studying for the bar, and basically said, I'm just letting you know that one, I went into your office while you're gone and stole some chocolate, and B, it's really hot on the third floor.
And you wouldn't want that chocolate to melt and go to waste.
Mhm.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Coffee.
If you give me $20, I'll pull a fire alarm now. Do it.
Didn't work the last time.
I don't know if anybody else has heard the story of the worst presentation ever, which was when.
It was a perfectly fine presentation,
The
once you got to the point of giving.
Once I could give it, but I had put a lot of preparation into this presentation, and I had tried it out on another rig, and it was working perfectly, and
Mhm.
it was great. I couldn't get it to work on the rig
In the hall.
in the hall.
Oh my God.
And so I had to convert it over into PowerPoint at the last possible second. So I did that and it was okay and it was okay. And then I got up to, I was on a panel in each presentation between each document.
Mhm.
I got up to give my presentation and I plugged in my laptop and I hit.
Jeez.
And I go, I tried to fix it for a second and then I turned to the moderator and I said, I'm going to have to ask you to put on the next panelist.
Oh, wow.
And then I spent like 20 minutes not listening to the next panelist, fixing my computer.
Well, it was okay, the next panel was Pompeo,
The
right?
next panelist was Pompeo, so I owe him a debt of gratitude.
Well, I have, whenever I'm doing like newer librarians I haven't taught before, I was basically give them the litany of things like, things can go wrong in the classroom, and if they have gone wrong, I've experienced that. And let me tell you all the ways, I'm like, I am somewhat immune now to like caring about what happens. Like I brought a bottle of water along while I lecture and managed to spill it all the front down the front, you know, trip over myself in front of a classroom. Yeah, so.
That's so my wife. She was at this investigation. She's an FDA investigator. She was doing a drug firm. The lawyers will follow you around Sesame when you're inspecting a drug firm. And they were sitting at the conference table around the conference room. She's listening to them, her observations. She's got her partner with her. She goes to sit in the chair, just misses it. Totally misses the chair.
I would do that.
And Grant, her partner, knew that her grace level is zero. I mean,
Yeah.
utterly zero. And everybody else is worried they just killed the FDA investigator. they're all
Or
like
that perhaps she's intoxicated.
right, exactly. And Grant's just laughing his ass off because he knows that.
Oh, that's a kindred spirit. I don't know if I've fallen off my chair, but I've probably done everything but.
we were going to the Cali conference in Boulder. She went to the Cali conference in Boulder. Kate fell down about 3 flights of stairs on her stairs on her butt, and bruised herself pretty good. So she's worried about. And we were flying out the next day. She's like, "Do you think I'll get a blood clot? You're gonna get a blood clot in your ass on the plane ride to Boulder. I think you're okay."
That's not the like obituary we want.
No, exactly. She doesn't get along with power tools. This is when I still went upstate New York. We had part of a tree come down the front yard, and it was a big windstorm, so the tree got backed up for weeks. So she's just tired looking at it. She's impatient. She's tired looking at it. And I'm sitting in my office working, and I can see the front yard, and I see her walk by in shorts, flip-flops, with a chainsaw. Like, there's no way. I don't think I've ever moved so fast in my life.
I don't.
Oh, yeah,
Some of them are too high.
figures that out, let me know.
A technology conference and we can't figure out the most basic.
I figured it out by stealing Harold's chair.
That's a mechanical problem. So
Yeah, that actually might be the best, just get there early and.
Yeah,
swap
find
chairs.
the appropriate height chart.
It would last session, I just was this.
all the trouble.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in like you walk into like, if you've ever been into like a kindergarten classroom and you're all like, everyone
But they have
on
ordered
like a
it.
parent teacher night, it's like everyone's sitting at like this.
All right.
Yeah, we have to drop this off, yeah.
Yeah, I got all my.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Look what I found.
Oh,
Mine was working, I turned mine off. Now it's up. Go back.
Just wait for the green light. Yeah.
yeah, it worked?
Yeah. I can hear it. I'm off the air at the moment. You should sit wherever you would feel comfortable. Wherever you can quickly show me how to run a Mac.
I will quickly move my. Sorry about my.
By myself, I go pro first.
I'll sit over here.
I know, I keep sitting too close to the
Yeah.
mounted screen when I'm looking at them.
Should have put up a countdown clock. Be entertaining.
I know.
You know, kids, we're all just gonna sit here for the next, however many minutes, just yes, wide-eyed, like.
I can stare back. I just keep wanting to tell the youngers among you, which include you, you'll need these someday.
Oh.
Someday you too will need reading glasses.
Oh,
Maybe
no,
not.
I've been blind since, now I'm 12 years old,
Well, I
so.
effectively had them too at one eye.
I fully plan on presenting ripped off versions of other people's work until I'm 80, so. Sarah, get busy, would you?
So you're saying you're the Mr. Spacely model of a boss? Is that, you know, George invents an idea and Mr. Spacely's like, I have a brilliant idea.
Just son, get it here.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna do it for 2 more years?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
I think he pretty much means like kind of a KISS commemorative band way.
Yeah, sort of.
So if you're Spacely Sprockets, who's Cogswell Cogs?
It's an interesting question. I don't know. If you get Sarah at the right moment, she'll tell you about all of my pointy-haired boss characteristics. And go ahead, Bill, I'm sure.
I don't think you need to catch her at the right moment.
Wayne is always happy to volunteer in that respect.
That moment is called Thursday.
All day, every day, 24/7,
Well, happy hour.
365.
And having asked that question, I now feel safe turning on the microphone.
One of those advanced computers.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Hirsch of the University of Cincinnati, and with me is,
Sarah Frug from the Legal Information Institute.
and we're here today to talk about a joint project we've been working on for about a year so far, the reboot of the Security Lawyer's Deskbook, which has been housed at the University of Cincinnati since the mid-1990s. So to begin with, what is the Security Lawyer's Deskbook? For those of you who aren't even real clear what securities practice is, well, first of all, is there anybody who'd like an explanation of what securities law is overall? So then, it is a very, as are many other practices, a very specialized practice. It involves primarily federal law and federal regulation, and then branching out from that, federal court decisions. And the key agency administering securities law, of course, is the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And much like tax practice does with its regulatory structure, the SEC has developed a specialized nomenclature where they give various alphanumeric rule names. So for like SX and such things. But of course, under the Administrative Procedures Act, the authoritative regulations still have to be published in the Federal Register and CFR. So it becomes useful to practitioners, I should say, to be able to find the information they're looking at with reference to their peculiar nomenclature. But first, let's go back into the deep history of the web in the mid-90s, and around the same time, even a little bit before HTML had become well known, other markup language was under a lot of discussion, including SGML. And there began something called the Text Encoding Initiative, which continues in some form today at the link you see on the screen. And part of that developed a subdomain, which was the Legal Text Encoding Initiative. And one of the people who was quite involved with that early on was Nick Finca, who was then of UC Law, in the law library, and was working with Taylor Fitchett, the law library director, on the then new Center for Electronic Text in the Law. And in that center, Nick and Taylor developed a couple of significant, at least in their view then, and in terms of usefulness, two databases, one of which was a corporate law database, which primarily related to securities law under the jurisdiction of the Securities and Exchange Acts and then subsequent acts, And they also developed a database on human rights law, and there remains to this day a very active human rights center at our law school called the Urban Morgan Institute for Human Rights, and it's very well known, and its director edits a journal in that field. So I am going to give you a very brief tour of what the Security Lawyer's Deskbook has largely looked like from the mid to late 90s. As soon as I can identify where the cursor is on the screen, which I'm having some difficulty doing. Oh, that's why, because I don't have it on that screen. There we go. So this is just give you, if you had gone to the Securities Deskbook, Law Deskbook, you would find a table of contents. That would take you to a more in-depth table of contents, and we're going to pick some rules and regulations. Here we're going to take regulation SK, and then you see the specific entries in that regulation. There's Article 1, and there it is, and we would click on that for the text, and there you see flat text, straight HTML listing the text of that regulation, pretty much word for word as it should appear in the CFR. Pardon my unfamiliarity with the Mac interfaces. Including getting back to the current slide. The site, surprisingly to me, but not to those who use it, was being very heavily used. And this was the statistics from the last full month before we took it offline. Actually, this was before, a couple of months before we took it offline. And you can see that as late as May of 2012, it was getting 61,000 plus unique visitors a month with 141,000 visits. Who were those people using Security Lawyer's Deskbook? Well, number 2 domain, staff at the SEC is who's using our Deskbook to consult their regulations. Their own website, until I think less than a year ago, I haven't verified the date it went up, but their own website did not give public access to SEC regulations until within the last year. So we had what seemed to be a well-regarded site. We know that if something was missing from that site, we heard about it quickly from practitioners, and that in fact was the main problem with the site, keeping it up to date. The site had for many years being administered by a student worker being supervised by one of our reference librarians, Ron Jones, and she was manually basically going through the new regulatory releases from the SEC and copying and pasting them into straight HTML and then manually putting in the links. And on top of how, on a day-to-day basis, when nothing new is happening, you can imagine how labor-intensive that is. Once Congress gets in there and starts telling the SEC, hey, you've got all these new authorities you need to implement rulemakings on, and these would recently have included Sarbanes-Oxley and Dodd-Frank, and we can, of course, anticipate going down the road. We'll have further crises that will require further statutory and administrative work. So we just simply had to find a way to make this site usable, but to the end user, while making it a lot easier and less labor intensive for us. We considered several options, including in trying to engage a commercial publisher for a joint venture. That included contacting the 10K people who ultimately got bought up by Morningstar, and I was in consultation with Morningstar for months before I gave up on them, because every time I talked to them, they were still reorganizing what they had done with Securities 10K. We could try selling ad space, but I had several problems with that, including to whom would I sell, and do I really want a lot of ads on our site? We could give up and shut it down and give us less work to do, but then what would happen to those several tens of thousands of people who are visiting our site every month? Where would they go? And as I said, the SEC added regulations to its site only recently, but that did offer the question, can we offer added value beyond what the SEC offers? And in fact, we can, because the SEC regs just cite and quote CFR without their own special regulatory nomenclature. Then, out of the blue, it hit me last May of last year. At that time, Legal Information Institute released its new version of the CFR that they were populating with, Sarah will correct me if I'm wrong, bulk XML downloads or CAT transfers from FedSys, the new federal system that ultimately replaced much of eGPO. But the LII site adds a lot of value over what you get at FedSys, and we'll show you that in a few minutes. So, we know the nomenclature, we know the truly authoritative version of the regs is going to be what comes out of the CFR. So why don't we take our site with the nomenclature and turn it into a front-end table of contents that then links to the data being provided by LII? So I talked to Tom, and Tom thought it was a good idea, and at last year's Cali in San Diego, Tom, Sarah, I think Wayne was there, and I met and started talking all this over. So what can they offer us? This is the eCFR page at FedSys. So here's one of our rules. One of the rules, it actually has a name under the nomenclature that I don't have memorized, but it is in the CFR, Title 17, Section 230.100, a simple definition of terms and rules used in the regulation under the Securities Act of 1933. And you'll see pretty much you get the rule, and then they send you out to a bunch of other links at the bottom if you want some other information. But none of that is substantive. You see a very brief history note at the bottom saying where the original source is in the Federal Register, and that's all. Whereas when you go to the LII's presentation of that rule, you get these tabs that start with the black letter text of the CFR, but then add a currency tab that tells you what's the current status of this regulation with links as to where you can go to get more recent information. Here you see a link to volume 77, number 66 of the Federal Register from April 2012. You can find out if there's rulemaking going on, and you get then the parallel sites back to the United States Code, which ultimately provides the authority for section. So why Legal Information Institute? They already maintain everything we need, the U.S. Code and the Code of Federal Regulations. So their collections are exactly complementary to what we need to be able to present. And with that, maybe a slide early.
Sure.
I'll turn it over to Sarah. But I will say what we envisioned at our end to begin with was the Deskbook contents would be flat. The statutes and regulations would link to their presence on LII. And what Sarah gave me good advice on was that the existing statutes and regs text pages would need to be redirected, and that we would like to see our logo as part of a branding on the Legal Information Institute pages so users would not forget how they got there, and that we are the home and have been the security lawyer's desk book. Going down the road from there, we want to give the site a new front-end user interface that's not 1990s. And so I ultimately chose WordPress because I have a basic familiarity with it. The law school's main website is in Drupal 6. It's built by an outside contractor who works under the direction of our Director of Communications, and I did not want to have to begin with, I wasn't sure Drupal was a good fit for this, and it might be if we had people in-house working on it, but we don't have people in-house who are experts in Drupal. And we didn't want to have to go through the political process involved in getting this outside group to be doing the contracting for it. And I really didn't think the layout of the law school's main website suited what we want to do. So I chose WordPress because I had enough familiarity with it already from my own blogging to think we could get it to do what we needed to do. And then as part of phase 2, the next phase, the search engine, rather than searching flat text on our site, will run the searches against all the fine data at LII. And with that, Sarah's going to take over the next point.
So this sounds easy, right?
Who says it's easy? Come on.
Right? 15 minutes? Yeah. All right. We thought it shouldn't cost anything. It should immediately remove everyone's maintenance problems. And we should be able to launch it in about a week. Ken mentioned that the conversation that we had took place at Cali last summer, and we put up the redirects about a week ago. One of the things that hit us was that there were really 3 problems. 2 with securities law citations. As Ken mentioned, the citations to the U.S. Code, the way that the securities statutes are classified, makes them go into many, many places. And so in order to take a citation to a section and point it at a place in the U.S. Code was not a trivial matter. The SEC nomenclature also is different, and we also had the problem with the legacy website. We had to redirect everything, and it wasn't feasible to do this at a server level because LII was reauthoring the static pages for UC. We had to go essentially page by page. Very quickly, this is what we ended up doing. The Deskbook before and the pages are nearly identical, except that each page had a redirect in a refresh tag, and it also had a note at the top indicating where the user was being sent. The refresh is it's about 2-second delay for the short term. What resources did we have available? This was not anyone's only project in the last year. Ken talked about his crew, individual students. We also worked with work-study students. And on our side, we discovered after the conversation last summer that there were a number of small details wrong with the CFR in Title 17. One of the problems that we had was just that, and I think that those of you who have seen us at Cali before have heard this many, many times, so I will apologize in advance. The XML that we get is a little bit difficult to work with, and sometimes in the process of attempting to build our own CFR, we discover mistakes that have to be corrected, and Wayne is the person who is saddled with the task of correcting all of these problems that we run across. It happened that as soon as we took on the Deskbook, we realized that there were a couple new ones in the CFR. We had a fantastic work-study student who took charge of doing all of the relinking and all of the redirection. And from the Department of True Confessions, I took this as an opportunity to make our XSLT a little bit more maintainable because we had some work that needed to be done there, and it was a chance to rip out some of the stuff that we've done before and make it a little bit more generalized so that eventually we can move toward a central one. So how did we build it? We have Table 3 database that, again, Wayne built. We looked very closely at the regulations to, essentially the problem with the regulations was that we just weren't familiar enough with nomenclature like item or article or rule to be able to know for certain. And so essentially for every part of the CFR or for every named regulation that appeared in the Deskbook, we student go in and double check on the location. So there was a lot of semi-automation. And here are, for those of you who are building systems on the background, you can imagine that having a database and mapping everything in the database to a set of file names that were crafted by hand, and that makes sense to a person who is a domain expert and who worked out file names and directory names that correspond to how they think about the material is not necessarily something that is trivially easy to automate. So we've so far improved the CFR. We're doing a little bit better. We've added refer-based branding infrastructure so that in every page in Chapter 2 of Title 17, which are the regulations of the Securities and Exchange Commission, we have a link to we have a link to the UC site, and hopefully this will actually come up here. We're having a little bit of a slow connection there, and so we have that co-maintained on all of those pages. And then we've relinked the Deskbook contents pages and added the redirects as well. The part that is much more pleasant than the sad tale of how much more expensive and more headache-inducing this was than we expected it to be is that we have had quite a bit of benefit from engaging in this project. On the UC side, we have everything in place, but on our side, we've been able to unlock a lot of the expertise that is embedded in the content of the Deskbook for our own purposes. We have an experimental feature right now. It's not live on the site, but we've crawled the SEC and FINRA, and we're providing guidance document search. So far, we have gotten far enough in the process to realize that in order to turn this into a production feature, it's going to take a lot more work because of the specialized nomenclature and because of the collision in the language of the regulations. So more than one rule 100, for instance. But the other, this is taking a second to load, so I think I can go back. The other thing that we've gained is a lot of information that has helped us with our linked data features. And here, this is a little bit hard to see, unfortunately, but I can start over here. We have this is part 210 of Title 17. Wayne hooked up a visualizer to connect to a triple store that we're using to maintain metadata about the Code of Federal Regulations. And we actually have a bit more experience working in a couple of other domains, particularly agriculture. But we went through the experiment of seeing what could we find out from Title 17 about securities regulations. I have Part 210 of Title 17 in the middle here, and I can explore a couple of different pieces of a couple of different kinds of metadata. I can get the structure. I can get the structure of the CFR, and again, it's a little bit slow because it's pulling a lot of live data. I have so Part 210 is in Chapter 2, which are the regulations of the Securities and Exchange Commission, which are part of can then get more information on that. The Securities, I have a property called Has Agency Match. That's just something that we made up in order to get a connection between the entity, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the regulations of the Securities and Exchange Commission during the prototyping phase. What's nice about this is that I can connect this up to the DBpedia resource. And once I've done that, I can get all of this metadata about the Securities and Exchange Commission that is based on pulling data out of Wikipedia. I can take this back for a second. If I go back and start with, again, Part 210, I have other properties that I can use. I have, for Part 210, the full name is, or the full catch line indicates that there are several statutes that it's associated with. And for each of those, I have a match, a property called Has Legislation Match. And we can, it's going to pull up a little bit more than we wanted it to, but we have a note here for the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, Investment Company Act of 1940, and the Securities Exchange Act. You'll see these three dots. Those are drawn out of the table of popular names. And in the table of popular names, there were three different names of legislation that corresponded to the same thing, which is why it looks a little bit strange.
So those are all the authorizing statutes, Sarah?
Those are all of the statutes that are associated. Those are all of the named statutes that are associated with that section. If we want to do authorizing statutes, and to clean this up again because it gets pretty heavy. I have is authorized by, and it tells me that I have 30 related resources. I can expand all of these. These come out of the parallel table of authorities, and that's going to pull up every single section of the U.S. Code that appears in the parallel table of authorities as an authority for Part 210. What we decided to do, at least in the prototyping stage, was to separate out things that were referenced explicitly. So Securities and Exchange Commission as a federal entity, or named legislation that appeared in the text from the automated resources that compile all of the available authorities from the parallel table of authorities. Because we found that there are a lot of authorities that are mentioned for a particular part of the CFR. Parts can be very big, and so we just tried it both ways so that we could see what we would come up with essentially. I'm not going to wait for all of those. I'm going to try not to wait for all of those to load. Another thing that we did was to take advantage of the subject matter classification that's being provided by the Office of the Federal Register. And here I have a term from the Federal Register, thesaurus of indexing terms. This one is, and again, I apologize for the speed here. It's the visualization software is pulling a lot of data live, and it can be pretty slow. This is just a note for the concept in the Federal Register thesaurus of securities. And then I loaded this in advance, but it seems to have disappeared on me, so I will go back to this. If I expand this here, what this will show me is all of the other parts in CFR that the Federal Register has tagged with that subject term. So this will be everything in the CFR that is associated store so that you can see the results that you get when you run a live query, because the visualizer is running pretty slowly at this point.
Sarah, I wonder if you closed some of the windows that you've got open, especially that one that's loading some of the tabs, especially that one that's loading very slowly, if it might not speed it up.
Yeah, it's just not being even responsive to do that, unfortunately.
To give you some idea of the scale, there are how many triples, Mike, that this thing is looking at?
120 about, right, Sarah? 120 million triples?
No, this is about 5 million.
Oh, okay.
In this
Much
store.
smaller one.
This is, in working with triple source software, we discovered that you can use a free and open source product, and it will get you up to about 100 million triples, depending on the complexity of the data. And when we tried to load in an ontology that contained 125 million triples, we were not able to get that to scale on open source software, and so we switched over to, we have at the moment a trial of proprietary triple source software that is more scalable and more capable, produced by Onto Text. It's called Alvin.
So
All right,
question,
everyone
how
have
are you
this
building
one.
the triple store? You're building it from the CFR XML, and you're just parsing it out into relationships?
Yes and no. The CFR XML comes into us. We go through our cleanup curation process, stick it into native XML database. Sarah's written some X queries and pull out information, and then we also have MySQL databases for our table-free PTOA and pop and stuff, which we pull out and make into N triples. Is it, Sarah, or is it RDF XML?
We're in the prototyping phase, so we actually have been a little bit sloppy about it. It depends what the data source looks like. If it's more convenient to do RDF XML, because that's the way that the text is structured, then we do that. Otherwise, I was generating N triples based on, we maintain our CFR XML in an exist XML database. And so one of the nice things about that is that it has a Lucene index, so you can do a full text and fuzzy matching based on full text search, in addition to XQuery, XPath-based search. So it's very, very easy to generate N triples based on, for instance, cross-references. Was sort of one of the places where that
But
technique.
long story short, you have to pre-process before you can even get it to there based upon what you're getting out of it.
Yes.
We do. We add the cross-references, and Wayne fixes the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, FedSys XML for the CFR is very, very, very badly broken. And it has no problem.
That's what you were hinting at earlier.
Yeah,
It's a nightmare, frankly.
it is unusable as XML. It works great for GPO's purpose to display it on their website, but it is unusable.
So as data, it's not usable, but as a document to publish their version of XML.
That's about it, yeah.
You'll see if you're curious about how if you want to work with the FDSys XML, I can show you the ins and outs of that. There are some quirks to it, and it's I guess one of the things to understand is that it is being used to display, and so you have to be a little bit careful about checking metadata and so forth, because we're attempting to use it for a purpose that it was not necessarily designed to be used for. I'm switching over for a moment just to show the intersection between subject tagging. One of the things that we were curious about, and again, this works a little bit better in places where we have concepts from slightly different contexts. So in the agriculture side, it was very useful to relate an economic concept and an agricultural concept in here. Here I've just done parts and the CFR where the Office of the Federal Register has tagged, has put in a subject tag of both securities, which is over here, and banks or banking. And when we run that query, we can get a list. And this is something where we could really use domain experts to give us better advice about how to interpret these results. Some of this is pretty straightforward in places that you expect. You expect Title 12 for banks and Title 17 for securities. But then we also have some interesting material from Title 31, which is not something that we necessarily would have focused on, but in terms of being able to offer users better clustering of search results, or just a better overview of what regulations they might be interested in. We find this somewhat promising. A couple of other things, and I'm going to try to get this browser to be a little bit more responsive here. One of the things that was very useful, you've seen so far, we did subject matter terms that are applied by the Office of the Federal Register, also related legislation, related federal agencies or entities. We also have been able to extract the cross-references and we've been able to extract the cross-references and we found some interesting things. One of the things here is just, again, having a better sense of all of the different places. For those of you who software developers, what we're finding is that it's just it's a very convenient way to work with the material, because although it's very easy to extract a list of all the places that the regulation I'm looking at points to, it's obviously a little bit more complicated to get everything that's pointing in. And so we found this to be useful in a couple of situations. Sometimes we find definitional sections pointing to each other. Definitional sections, for instance, in two completely different titles of the CFR, Title 12 and Title 17, again, frequently show up linking to each other in definitional sections. We also find a lot of places where an individual section within a part of the CFR will be pointing back to its definitional section, or will be pointing out to a definitional section someplace else. And those are particularly important where you have language in the CFR that has vague scoping. Our favorite example is, for purposes of this part, unless the context requires otherwise. And so the cross-reference patterns can be helpful with that. The last piece of this, just going to pull this up. These are all, this is a small, part 210 is small. It has just these two sections or rules in it. These are, on the other hand, going to be ones that get a lot of references coming in, and so that's just another thing that it makes it a little bit helpful to be able to apprehend traffic. We're now getting, we're not getting as many visitors as we're going to the Securities Lawyers Deskbook in the past, but we have gained immediately about 1,300 visitors, 1,300 visits a day, in which in the summer is more than we might expect. This was a little bit of a long slog, and so we try to capture lessons learned on each one of these. Ken has helpfully provided his rule of thumb. He thinks it takes twice as long as you think.
Yeah, I should have said at least.
I had an engineering manager once who told me to multiply all estimates by pi, and I think that was maybe underestimating it on this one. We didn't involve stakeholders in this as early as we might have, and we were going to do this again, I think, just to keep it off the back burner and a little bit more present in our minds. We would have done a more regular check-in and staggered our testing instead of having me toss everything over the transom to Ken's team at the very end and saying, okay, see whether I've broken everything, and then a more careful release planning. I'll put in a pitch for things that anybody else can use. My guess is that everyone has some resources that they're trying to maintain that are a little bit difficult, that are done by cutting and pasting, and that are on the receiving end of continuous updates. We maintain persistent URLs for US Code and CFR. The table of popular names of legislation will also show classification in Table 3. So in a piece of legislation where everything ended up, and the parallel table of authorities is in there as well. And so I hope that those potentially will be helpful to more than just this product. And we'll ask a question.
Questions? And then or I can show you the video first, and then we can take more questions. So what we, that's quite all right. The stage we're at now is we brought on a couple of students just over 2 weeks ago to start building out the WordPress site that I had been sketching out the design of. And I will show you what it looks like at the moment, but it's very much an early form and will likely change. So I want the other one. So let me close this one. You notice, for the moment, we have the SEC seal up here, and if you click on that, it goes to straight to their website. Several months ago, I asked them, and by asking them, I mean since they had a pretty bad contact list, I wrote to the director's office figuring it would get shuttled to the right office, and they did in fact. I asked them simply for permission to use this on our website. Those of you who know intellectual property law will know that things created by the government or its employees are not subject to copyright. So I don't have any copyright issues with reproducing their seal, but they do have a regulation that at least asserts you may not use it without their permission. I don't know if there's a statute to back that up with penalties to impose. But it's a matter of a person who believes in good form and not stealing. I did ask them for expressly for permission to put this on our site, and I gave them the context. I got a copy of an email that office sent to their public information office saying, look into this, and I'm waiting to hear, so for now, this is first of all only accessible from within our network, but even when it goes public, I'm operating on the assumption that silence is assent until they tell me otherwise. So we have that, and we have basically, when I captured this a week ago, or rather at the beginning of this week, we just had the beginnings of the table of contents being set out. There's several seconds of introduction before, of static before this will start moving around. We're gonna have a blog here, at least one blog, written by one of our securities faculty. And this is a drop-down table of contents that cascades to one level lower. I haven't decided whether I'm happy with this or not. So when you select the appropriate regulation, you get one sub-level, and then out to the actual text of that subdivision, and then you see you've got the breadcrumbs to help you go back. Click on the rule, and you go out to legal information. This slide didn't show the co-branding because I copied this before it was available. So that's it. And so going forward, we don't have to worry about, on our side, updating the individual regulations, because whenever the update's applied, LII will put it into their feed. So what we have to be aware of is when individual regulations are deleted, or new sections, and more likely new subparts of several sections are added. We will have to monitor for that, so we can add or subtract those from our table of contents with the appropriate links as possible. But that is a much less daunting challenge than keeping up with, and then in fact copying and pasting the text of every single change that goes on with the regulation. Are there any further questions? Yeah.
Not to sound pornographic, but if I enter through the back end and start my research at LII and ask for securities regulation, will I also see your brand then?
If they go to those parts of Title 17, do they get that? No matter how they get there?
I'll pick this up here.
Which is what I understood you to say.
What we're doing so far is this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
In front of the, no, I'm standing right in front of the screen.
So we're doing that for the moment. We're not pointing back to the table of contents for that area.
But if they came in through your slide, would they still see that as opposed to through
Yes.
my slide? Yep.
We were going to do a co-branding so that it was only going to show if people came in from Securities Lawyers Deskbook. And then given the back and forth and the role that you see is playing in giving us information about how to maintain the materials, we decided that it was more appropriate to do it this way. So we have it co-maintained with.
And I don't know if you noticed that on the bottom part of our screen on our front page says powered by LII.
I mean, just so the message isn't lost, Scott, I mean, we are very interested in doing co-brands with anybody who's got substantive expertise that they want to contribute.
That's open.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you all very much for coming in. And if you want any more information, if you want information on the technical side, contact Sarah. If you want information on our political side, or what else we're going to do with the content, ask me, and we'll be glad to respond.
Hey, Sarah, just when you think you're getting off the hook, could we show them the horsies?
Horsies.
Hey.
Or am I poking something with a long stick that should not be poked here?
Well, let's see what it feels
It's
like.
too late
doing
now,
for us
Tom.
today.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I need 1 second because I need to mirror these displays so that I can actually see it. It's a little bit tough to see on that screen, which I apologize for. Can you guys see it on your
Yeah.
screens a little better? Okay. So I will mirror these. This is based on research that it was done by one of our other programmers, Mohammed Aswad. He worked with Masters of Engineering students at Cornell from a couple of ontologies, one a product ontology and the other a UNSPSC, which is an international product ontology, and the other ontology, an agricultural ontology called the Agrivoc, to map terms in those ontologies to the Code of Federal Regulations. He actually just presented some of the results of that work at the Semantic Technology and Business Conference in California last week. We have here a section in Title 7 of the CFR. We can connect this up with the hierarchy of the CFR. You saw that here. But the more interesting part is where we can take a look at what it's related to in UNSPSC. This is not, okay, I'm gonna try this again.
That's not horses.
Not horses. Not horses, okay, wait.
Cheese and goats. There they
Horses,
are.
okay, so we have UNSPSC horses, and we don't have an endpoint set up for that. You might ask, well, why bats? And we need to explore a little bit more over here in order to get that. We have, in addition to the UNSPSC concepts, we have Agrivoc concepts, and if I'm correct, we get horses and rats again, but we also get some nasty horse conditions or parasites that also show up.
So it's not just horses, it's horse suffering horses.
It's suffering horses.
I mean, short of kittens, what could be better?
Turtles.
Oh, ponies.
Well, true.
And so one of the things that we were attempting to do over here was to take advantage of the ability to map from an agricultural ontology, which knows the relationship between horses and all of the problems that afflict horses, and then the subject matter classification that the Office of the Federal Register was providing, where it would tag CFR parts with concepts that were associated with economic activity like imports and exports, like I mentioned earlier. And so we were able to find a couple of places where, given the way that the CFR is written, because the same thing is often referred to in a number of different ways, we get poor recall when we're trying to do a search, because sometimes they'll use the common name of an animal, and sometimes they'll use the scientific name of an animal. And so a full text search will not give you all of your results. And so if we can exploit the ontology and then exploit the cross-reference relationship or the structural relationship, so we have a horse over here and in a section, and then we have import in the part that section belongs to, or we have a horse in a section and it links to or is linked to from a section that deals with imports, then we're pulling in more results and apparently more relevant results than we were before. Are there other?
The other thing, of course, obviously, is if we pull imports out of there, can we get to imports from that node? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so if we pull imports out of there, and then we open up everything that imports refers to, we've got a pretty good conceptual overview of what there is in this title of CFR, at least, because that's all we have loaded at the moment that actually talks about imports. And as Sarah said, and this is a visualizer that for us is really just kind of a drawing of a fire hose that we have no idea how to drink from yet.
Right.
The immediate application is really in terms of search improvement through stuff like terms expansion, but as Sarah could run you through a litany, because I know she has one. of successive Sparkle queries that actually do serve to enhance recall on all of these various searches related to
Oh,
cows.
wow, so you've implemented something like that already in your,
Yeah, I mean, we did a very trivial one about a year ago that just consisted of hooking in stuff from the drug bank pharma database in Berlin to get CFR searchable by brand name of drugs and by drug components. So for example, if you search Title 21 of CFR, which is the food and drug section for Tylenol, you're not going to find it because the CFR regulates ibuprofen. But by going to drug bank and saying, okay, well, so what's in Tylenol? We can then search for ibuprofen and find all of the appropriate ways.
Acetaminophen.
Hmm?
Acetaminophen in that case.
Is it acetaminophen? Yeah, did I say ibuprofen? Sorry.
which would have been happening. But I get the idea, so, but did you pull that into your leucine index to search
We're,
those terms?
we're
So-
actually querying on the site.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
The thing about, it gets complicated when you
Yeah.
start pulling stuff into the leucine index, because, well, to start with, it's a lot more work.
Right, I mean,
because
your
you have to-
indexer would have to pick up the terms and it
Yeah,
gets very complicated.
the problem is not the indexer picking up the terms, the problem is what it's doing with the terms once it picks them up. So it just requires a lot of thought about how to how to allow it to tokenize and there are a lot of fiddly, I mean,
It sounds like you've thought
there
a
are a lot
lot
of
about how to
fiddly
approach the
details.
problem, that's why.
And the other thing is that we like to query it live, we like to query this triple store live because it is so experimental, and we don't have to re-index 500,000 documents every time we change our minds about what data we want.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's crew really crashed through a lot of these issues working on the guidance stuff that she was describing earlier. The idea there was that we would try to find, just by asking like librarians primarily, where the decent crawl points were for agency guidance for a couple of federal agencies. Because, you know, the way they structure this stuff on their sites is not great, and it's not easy to automatically distinguish something that is a guidance document from something that isn't. Wayne wrote a very nice little thing that goes through, and for all these sites, we slam the documents to Wayne's thing. It picks out all of the relevant CFR and US code citations. We feed those to the leucine index, and we then have a guidance, we then have a set of guidance documents that are indexed to the CFR parts and sections of the US code section, which is the basis of the guidance that Sarah was showing earlier. But that was where you first stumbled across you can't just jam stuff in a leucine index and expect it to be nirvana regime, right?
Well, the problem is that CFR sections have dots in the enumerators, and so it needs to be a string, except it doesn't quite want to be a string, and so
Got it.
you can duplicate the field, there are a number of techniques. You
So
have
it was difficulty in processing the tokenizer and the indexer to make it,
Yeah, you want to.
it shoved the term in.
You kind of want to tokenize in two different ways at the same time, which is.
Sorry.
No.
I know there's.
No.
No, those are really great questions, thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot of technical hurdles to jump over to get this thing working properly on all aspects, so.
So, I mean, as I said, we've got a map, we've got a picture of a fire hose now, and the question is, what features are we actually building this thing?
That's kind of half the problem with a lot of like data projects.
Yeah, I mean, my particular idea is just that, you know, at the end of the day, all search engines are slot machines. You stick something in and pull the handle and you get what you get, and the only things that you can really do are rig the machine in some way so that you get better results more often, or you can give some people something different that they can put in the slot. And this falls under the heading of giving people something different that they can put in the slot. If they want to search using a UNSPSC product code, good for them. And if you imagine that in a large scale context where you've got a business that's running a full inventory, as Cornell does actually, runs all of its inventory based on UNSPSC product code, then I mean theoretically you could slam your entire inventory against this thing and have it come back and say, oh, you know all that stuff you got in your warehouse, you got some compliance issues here, pal. Here they are.
Right.
I mean, that's the kind of thing we're starting to look at. The payoff here, I think, is in tying regs much more closely to the stuff that they're regulating, and less the sort of traditional legal research purpose.
Yeah, so like machine processing of those products. Managed to get a heavily interesting. I'm Sean.
I'm Tom, hi. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, yes, my flash drive.
I wasn't really expecting this.
Yeah. I'm just an old-fashioned kind of guy. I don't want something like a bag with my shoe.
But it's more appropriate now, actually.
It's all appropriate.
So you're at LII?
I am.
You are LII.
He is the
I
founder.
am the alleged director.
Co-founder and director.
Your whole team is there. You guys are all, your whole team works in Ithaca?
No, actually not. Our sister director is based in Atlanta. We have one program in Boston. At various times we've had people out in LA. It kind of depends on where people move.
You were quite restrained, Elizabeth.
I was, I mean, we moved past your part very quickly, and, I'm just kidding. It was very interesting. I was like coming to Cali and going to at least a couple sessions where I understand about 20% of what they're talking about, and this was one of them. And this is one of them.
But seriously, I wondered what the uses of a visualizer like that at teaching would actually be. Right, I mean, here's the structure. Here's a pretty picture of the structure.
Oh, it would be phenomenal to have some kind of visual thing for teaching. I mean, that's one thing that some of the Westlaw's played around with a little bit in, not this thing, but they'll have like visual key site where you see, here's where, here's the cases that overruled, or here's the relationship. And that is very popular with students, especially.
Fast cases are so much.
Yeah, fast cases, some of the visualization of, here's the citing material. So I think, visual stuff is very, when it's available, and it's not usually available for legal materials, it's valuable.
I was just thinking that,
You've seen the mapping that shows you circles, the size of which is based on how often
I'm
you use
wondering
words
to
in
what
a
extent
document.
it might be good for,
I did that
there's
to,
something really
did that to
different.
one of my articles.
It's not just.
I'll bet that.
It's like, it picks out, it picks out the most often used word is the largest circle, and then you
So,
go.
cheerleader.
Oh, yeah.
What was that comment that Scott made about the don't mean to be pornographic or
And
something?
sometimes, actually, in every time I teach, I always have one class where I'm going, okay, everyone needs to step back because you've all lost the forest through the trees, and I'm doing like the 3 branches of government, and okay, let's take an example where we have our statute and related to the